Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a really big topic from the AQA A-level psychology spec, the two-process model of phobias. This is a cornerstone theory for understanding why we fear what we fear, so let's get right into it. So think about it. That crippling fear of spiders, or the absolute terror of getting on a plane, where does it actually come from? Are we just born with these fears, or is there something else going on? Well, the behavioral approach has a pretty clear answer. Phobias aren't something you're born with, they're something you learn. So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the blueprint of the theory. That's all your AO1 description. Then we'll see how it's built in the real world, which is your AO2 application. And finally, we'll put the whole thing under the microscope for some critical AO3 evaluation. All right, first up, the blueprint. For AO1, we need to get our heads around Mohr's two-process model from way back in 1947. This is all about describing the absolute core of the theory. So the big idea here is that getting a phobia isn't just a one-off thing. Mohr said it happens in two distinct stages. First, the phobia is acquired. It's created through one type of learning. And then it's maintained. It's kept going by a completely different type of learning. Let's dig into each of those. So, stage one is all about classical conditioning. You'll probably remember this one from Pavlov and his dogs, right? It's all about learning by association. And when it comes to phobias, this is how something that was totally harmless to you one day becomes the source of intense fear the next. The classic and honestly pretty controversial example of this is the little Albert study. At the start, Albert wasn't scared of the white rat at all. It was a totally neutral stimulus. But then Watson and Rayner started making a loud, scary noise, the unconditioned stimulus, every time he saw the rat. Albert naturally learned to associate the rat with the scary noise. Pretty soon, just seeing the rat was enough to make him cry. The rat had become a conditioned stimulus, and the fear was the conditioned response. And this is where it gets really interesting. Albert's fear didn't just stop with the rat, it started to spread. He became scared of other fluffy things, like a rabbit and even a Santa Claus mask. This is called generalization, and it's super important. It explains why one single scary encounter with a poodle can lead to a phobia of all dogs, big and small. Okay, so that explains how a phobia starts, but why does it stick around for years? That's where the second process comes in, operant conditioning. You'll link this one with B.F. Skinner. This is all about how the consequences of our behavior make us more or less likely to do that same thing again. And this right here is the absolute key to why phobias are so persistent. Let's say you have a phobia of lifts. Every time you see a lift, your anxiety skyrockets. So you take the stairs instead. And what happens? That awful, panicky feeling immediately goes away. That feeling of relief is a super powerful reward. It's called negative reinforcement. It reinforces your decision to avoid the lift, which means you're more likely to do it again next time. And every time you do, the phobia just gets stronger and stronger. It's a total vicious cycle. All right, let's move on to AO2, application. So we've got the theory. Now let's see how it actually applies to the real world, to real phobias and how we can treat them. You can see this model playing out all the time. For someone with a dog phobia, a dog, which was once a neutral stimulus, gets paired with the trauma of being bitten. For a fear of public transport, a train carriage gets paired with the sheer terror of a panic attack. In both cases, a phobia is born through that process of classical conditioning. But here is where the model gets really powerful. It doesn't just tell us why people have phobias, it gives us a massive clue about how to help them. I mean, if a phobia is learned, it makes sense that it can be unlearned, right? And that's a game changer for therapy. And that's exactly what treatments like systematic desensitization are all about. It's about reversing that learning process. First, the person learns some deep relaxation techniques. Then, they create a fear hierarchy, a list of their fears from least scary to most terrifying. Then, step by step, they work their way up that list, pairing the feared thing with relaxation. The end goal, to create a brand new association, replacing fear with calm. We call that counter-conditioning. Okay, now for the really important part for your exams, the AO3 evaluation. We've seen the blueprint, we've seen the real-world build, but how well does this model actually hold up under a proper stress test? Let's get into the strengths and weaknesses. So on the one hand, it's got some pretty big strengths. That real-world application we just talked about, the fact that it led to effective therapies, that's huge. It's also backed up by lab studies, and it's what we call parsimonious. It gives us a nice, simple explanation for something that feels really complex. But you have to ask, is it maybe a little too simple? A model that's just about learning and behavior? Is it possible it's missing some other crucial pieces of the puzzle? Does learning really explain everything? And that leads us straight to its limitations. For one, it's pretty reductionist. It totally ignores biology and evolution, like the idea that we might be evolutionarily primed to fear things like snakes and spiders. It also struggles to explain phobias that pop up without any specific traumatic event. And a huge one, it completely neglects the role of our thoughts, our irrational beliefs, all those cognitive factors. Now, if you really want to nail that top-tier AO3, let's quickly apply the GRAVE framework to the Little Albert study. Generalizability. So low. It was just one baby. You can't apply that to everyone. Reliability and applicability are high, for sure. But the ethics, wow, just appalling by today's standards. No consent, no protection from harm. They literally taught a child to be fearful and then just sent him on his way. That's a massive evaluation point you need to know. So what's the bottom line? Well, you can think of the two-process model as a really strong, really important piece of the puzzle. It's brilliant at explaining how avoidance keeps a phobia going, but it's not the whole puzzle. It's a fantastic foundation, but it isn't the complete picture. And so I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Is the learned behavior we see in a phobia the actual root of the problem? Or is it maybe just the visible symptom of something much deeper, like a cognitive bias or even a biological vulnerability? Now, that's the kind of critical thinking that's going to push your analysis to the next level. Thanks for joining me.